Cheryl Campos is with us, who took to Twitter to say, the one thing this SVB run taught me is that most VCs know nothing about finance. Cheryl, what do you exactly mean? What does this sort of critique of your own industry meant to be talking about?
Well, thank you so much for having me. And this tweet took off because there was, in fact, an element of truth to it. This was partially a finance problem, but at the same time, it's a human behavior problem. This was a classic example of the prisoner's dilemma and everyone really acting individualistically versus collectively in the venture ecosystem. And so Silicon Valley Bank, quite frankly, was the partner of a lot of different players here. They were the first check-in a lot of different initiatives. They were the first bank account of many founders. They also took things personally as well. They built deep relationships with people, even giving out personal loans, mortgages, lines of credit for GP commits. And so that is something that I think that the ecosystem as a whole, if we had worked together, are going to be in severe crisis right now because there's going to be a significant gap in the market in terms of both access to capital and leadership. And so that is what communities like ours at VCFamilia are trying to do.
Let's talk about your community, because I believe when I look on La Familia's website, it was partners like Silicon Valley Bank that helped fund you to help continue to drive the pipeline, the conversation, the network. What do you do when Silicon Valley Bank has to pull back and, of course, disappears in terms of a player and infrastructure?
100%. So Silicon Valley Bank was our founding sponsor. They were the ones that gave us our first check when we were just at the idea stage, because they were the person that take on the most risk when it comes to funding things at the idea stage. And so they really took a chance to make this ecosystem better as a whole. And so we really wanted to partner with a bank that was mission aligned. They saw the vision, they saw what we were trying to create, and that's what we do. We took and used their support in order to build pipelines, right? We were helping everyone break into venture and also build their own startups. We helped them as well with their professional development and rising up the ranks. And last but not least, we actually helped them raise capital for their own funds. And so that, I think, is one of the key things that will be missing, right, is that first check-in that will allow people to take these initiatives and make the ecosystem better. And so, yes, we were exposed to SVB because we were their banking partner, and I think that's something that I, as an investor, as a founder, was also really cognizant of, because I have 20 portfolio companies. I have other founders that are reaching out to me. And so both as a founder, as an investor, I can clearly support using my own personal experience as well as the community as a whole.
Cheryl, talk to me about the last 48 hours, including this morning. Silicon Valley Bank has technically opened its doors in the last 30 minutes here in California. What have you had to do to help founders make payroll? Have you had to move money around? Have you had to make deals with co-investing partners and other VCs?
So, I mean, we all had a collective sigh of relief yesterday, right, when we saw that the government was going to step in there and make sure that deposits were whole. So we did, our money is safe, right, but the loss really is around losing Silicon Valley Bank as a partner and as a leader in this space. And so I think that that has allowed for founders, and including communities like ourselves, really go back to the basics, right, of our strategy, making sure that, you know, when times are tough, these are times where you know what people are made out of. And so going back to the fundamentals, supporting people with their payroll, supporting people with their strategies, and scaling things a little bit back to figure out how other things play out. We see this morning that First Republic and others potentially are at risk. And so rocky times are far from over. But I've seen this before. I was an executive at Republic, which is a startup that reached unicorn status, and I had my fair share of rocky times through COVID, through George Floyd. And so the biggest lesson that we can learn here is that when there's times of chaos, it's times of opportunity. And so by going back to basics and understanding where your position is right now, you're able to then take advantage of these chances.
If you go back 6 days before Silicon Valley Bank tried to issue shares and raise more money, before we knew what had happened, it seems like times are really hard for startups anyway.
Yes.
Has the last 5 days actually just masked what is a much bigger ongoing problem, cash burn and a lack of access to capital?
I don't think anybody saw this coming right before Wednesday or Thursday, and I think that was something where we saw a lot of founders are going to get hit by this negatively. But I'd like to also state that diverse founders in particular weren't even getting access to capital in the first place when capital was good and times were flush, right? We actually issued a statement last year with a couple other Latino organizations because even though it was the largest venture capital funding year to date, Latinos only got 1.2% of all of that. And so that is where we see that even when times are good, we're not getting enough money. And then diverse founders in particular will continue to have less access to capital. And so that's where that access and leadership that SVB played in this ecosystem will be missed. And that's why we're banding together with All Raise, Black VC, Gold House, and a couple other communities as well to show a united front. Our motto is La Unión hace la fuerza, which means strength and unity. And so we really want to make sure that we're there for our communities.